All right, Isaac, how's it going, man?
Good, man. How are you?
I am doing well. Thanks for hopping on and doing this. Yeah, why don't we start with who you are, where you're from, and what you do? A little background about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Isaac Sharp. I'm a record producer, songwriter from Nashville, Tennessee, back and forth a little bit the last year or so, but Nashville, basically.
Nashville and New York.
Yeah.
Yep, right on, man. Well, cool. So yeah, we started working together probably about a year ago,
Uh-huh.
and what were things? Obviously, you were already a working producer, had some stuff going on, but what were things like in the business before we started working together that kind of prompted you to want to get some assistance with it?
Man, so I think the catalyst really was COVID, which I'm sure was, the catalyst for a lot of people. But I think, I would have had the same problems just to a lesser degree, regardless of COVID. So the issue that I had was that I really hadn't developed any sort of a system or funneling for like getting work or like getting clients. I lived in Nashville. I did kind of the traditional recording studio internship, worked on and off for, some independent labels and, indie producers and stuff like that. And so I had work, but I had kind of work because other people went out and found it and then knew me. I didn't have really any work that I went out and found myself. And then so obviously when COVID happened, it just sort of like killed everything in terms of in-person work. And so then I was sitting there and I was just like, man, I have no idea how to pay the bills and how to use this skill set right now. And so I think that's kind of what really prompted me reaching out to you was developing or having the need to develop a system where I really didn't rely on anybody else. I had a fully remote kind of workflow and could just bring in work basically whenever I wanted to. And I remember, in the first few days of us talking about dark label stuff, like that was kind of the one thing that everybody said in the videos. And that's kind of the one thing, even guys like John and Adam would talk about it. Even the crazy thing is like, this is how like it really, there is no, there's no questioning it. Like if you want work, you just do these things and then work comes if you actually know what you're doing. And at first I was like, yeah, okay. Like there's gotta be a little bit more randomness to it than that. But as I've gone through it, it's like, oh, no, that actually is pretty much the truth. You do this and work will come.
Yeah, I say it a lot on these client exit interviews, so I sound like a broken record, but yeah, it's getting really, really good at just a couple of fundamental things.
Yeah.
And that's it. People like to
Yeah.
overcomplicate it or just not do something long enough to get good at it and then
Yeah.
just write it off as that doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't go 100% into the fundamentals. They give it maybe 70% of their energy and try it for a month and then determine whether it works or not. It's like, well, no, you do it until it works. Like you get good at it. Right.
Absolutely.
So yeah. And you had a very powerful, like, I remember like first 4 or 5 months.
Absolutely, man. It took off. And that was,
yeah,
that was what was cool, because obviously I guess I have a little bit of I don't want to say head start because I guess it kind of is, but I had a little bit of a head start where, I had the studio background and the kind of the Nashville production world background. So, the skill set was there, it just was a need to kind of get plugged into how to bring people in. And so once I started doing that, man, it was just, I think I had 10, the first thing I did was, a 10-song album. And so then I think within the first like 3 months, I had like 18 songs or something like that I had signed off on.
Yeah, there was some, you correct me if I'm wrong, but there was some, I was looking back at our notes, like maybe it was the first 4 months or so. You said something about like, yeah, there's like 60K of work or something kind of.
No, yeah. So it was insane. It was literally, I was able to, put people on kind of a monthly payment plan and, convince them all like, hey, we're diving into EPs and albums. So this isn't something that's going to be done in like 30 days. And so I think I divided up like 60 grand over the course of 6 or 8 months or something like that in payments. So, it wasn't a bad start at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause your thing is going after more kind of album projects and
absolutely.
Yeah. Stuff like that. Cool. Any other sort of big takeaways from working together or wins or anything that you want to share? I know I kind of fed you the answer there.
No, man, no. So, the biggest, I guess in terms of kind of like focal areas, in terms of like biggest like win takeaways, was really three things. The first thing was realizing that like, and we said this all the time, and the actual like Nashville studio world, we always joked around and said like production is 3/10 music and 7/10 psychology. But my biggest takeaway from this is like my being successful has almost nothing to do with my ability to make music. And I would say that that's probably the case for most of the people that are going to be talking with you. Like after a certain level of skill, you need to go and be like growing that skill and getting better and better and better. But the thing, at least for me, I realized was like, man, it was really like, was I staying disciplined? Was I really like managing my schedule the right way? Was I making sure to stay on top of reaching out to people and like following like the organic content posting? And so those kind of things were the biggest advantages to me, and especially like the morning routine stuff and just figuring out how to kind of get a grasp on like the psychology and the headspace end of it all was probably the biggest positive takeaway for me.
That's an important point, man, especially in markets like Nashville where it's like more traditional, because it's people can fall into the trap of like, well, if I just get really good, then I'll be successful. And like, that's a lot of times the advice they get from people they look up to. So then it's validated through that, right? It's like, I look up to that person. He's saying just get really good. Yeah. But I think what the thing that I see behind the scenes is a lot of people, even the big guys that I've consulted, like they don't really know how they got work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? No, so what other advice are they going to give outside of, hey, because that's what they feel happened. They just got really good and that's what happened. And obviously that plays into it. Being very good at the craft helps. But what I see from the outside is like just talking to some of those guys and being friends with some of those guys. It's like, well, they also have a lot of like natural abilities outside of just making music that are, for sure, whether they know it or not, are helping them develop a successful career. Again, whether they know it or not. So yeah, it's a great point you make, man. It's like, that's one part of it. But through going through this process, you realize that like, okay, well, there's all this other stuff that actually played into, getting the career that you wanted. So.
No, and I think the other big takeaway, which hopefully most people that are working with you learn pretty quickly, but for me, the other big takeaway was just the reality that like, especially coming from Nashville, where production has gotten so cheapened in terms of like the supply and demand and like the value level that people place on it. One of the biggest realizations for me was like, okay, like there are actually a lot of people out there that think it's worth paying $2,000, $2,500 per song. And that blew my mind, and you and I talked about it before. And I remember one day you were like, hey, the client just showed up and they're like, oh, I don't have enough money. I can't pay $1,000 for a song. And then they pull out like their brand new MacBook Pro. And it's just kind of like the light bulb went off for me. And I was like, you know what? Like I can expect people to pay this kind of thing if I really believe that I'm delivering this kind of product. And if I really am delivering this kind of product. And that was a big deal because I really, when we started, even though I was working on a lot of like Nashville projects and like really good records and stuff like that, it was really hard for me to, I guess, really picture in my mind doing kind of like remote bedroom production stuff and still being able to put like a really decent price tag on it. And so that was one of the best parts, was realizing that kind of like there are those people out there. And if you're not finding them, it's really probably more of like how you're looking than it is anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously there's a lot of options out there, different business courses and different things like that, or just, going out and getting advice from other producers you look up to. But why did you decide to, come work with us here?
Man, so I remember I was actually, I think, just staying at home. It was like the beginning parts of COVID, I guess the beginning parts of year 2 of COVID, really. But I remember reaching out to a couple of people. I think John True was who actually initially referred me back to you. And the funny thing is, I didn't know who you were. We had a couple of conversations on the phone, and it wasn't really a whole lot deeper than that. But I think what really sold me was just that more than anybody else, like you didn't hide who your past clients were. You didn't hide like what their results were. You were very transparent. It was like, hey, like here's Austin, here's John, here's Adam, here's the other guy in Charlotte, Mark. Here's all these guys. And this is what they do. And, results may vary. Like you were really straightforward. You're like, I'm not saying that like you're going to start a Facebook group and make, $3,000 a song and make $300,000 a year immediately. but these are the people, they did this and it worked. And I did, I checked up on a couple of them and just asked them. And so I think it was that transparency more than anything that kind of sold me on initially working with you.
Cool. Well, I've enjoyed our time together. It's been
sure,
good. You put in a lot of work, and I appreciate that. Any advice that you would give to someone who may have been in the same position, maybe not COVID specific, but maybe someone that's like trying to do the Nashville thing or the LA thing or kind of the traditional way, and they're struggling with that and still want to pursue it, but are also getting to a point where they're kind of like, well, I need to make some money here, get control of where my work is coming from. Like, well, what may be some advice that you would give, not just talk to Dan, but like some actual advice?
Yeah. So I kind of would give a few different things. The first thing I would give is get your head right first. And that seems kind of silly and counterproductive, but I think we all have this mentality that like we get real stressed out and worked up. And it's like, okay, well, as soon as I get the next client, I'll calm down or I'll be good. And it's just kind of like, if you go at it like that, then you're just going to stay stressed, and it's going to be whatever the next thing is. Like, oh, you got the client, but now I got to write the song. Oh, I wrote the song, and I got it. And so like, it's really hard to actually function that way. But two, it's just really hard to enjoy the job and actually like what you're doing. And so, I've talked about it before, and it's like, if I'm not going to enjoy something, like, why would I do this? I'd go work at, an office job or something that was reliable, that paid first. If it's, if I'm just going to be just as likely to hate it. And so, kind of my first thing is like, get your head right. And if you do the morning routine stuff, like start reading some books, do Audible, like run, work out, whatever. That really was a game changer for me. The second thing is, don't bite off, like take it slow at first. I got really, I guess, lucky, but in a way I almost bit off more than I could chew the first 6 months. And so there was a lot of kind of added stress for me, where I went from having no work to having 4 different clients that I was juggling, 5 different clients that all had like 5 or 6 songs each. And I managed and made it through. But at the same time, I think it would have been a lot easier if I would have just paced myself and said, all right, the next person I book, I'm going to start working with them in 3 months, not next week. Or I'm going to start working, hey, I can't work with you until July or whatever. That really was the only thing in this whole process that I think that I got wrong. And so that's kind of a big thing. Like a lot of guys, especially like people that are Nashville guys or people that are already good, that already kind of have like a skill set for how to do it. It's going to be really easy for them, I feel like, and they're going to get work really quickly. And if they're anything like me, they're going to kind of get really excited about that and just kind of keep going. And then all of a sudden you've got like 14 songs on the docket, and you either have to hire out for a bunch of things, or you've got to just not sleep for like 2 months.
I had a call earlier with a client going through the same thing. We talked about the kind of scarcity thinking about that, and like you're not going to lose it. That people assume that they're hiring someone that's busy, they're going to be busy. That's why they want to work with that person. So
absolutely,
you don't have to try to do 400 projects at once.
Yeah. And, honestly, most people respect you more for it. They space it, because I actually, I almost lost a client because I had a guy that had messaged me a few times around the holiday, and I told him I'd get back to him. And just between, my fiance got COVID, like all kinds of stuff happened. And so I just didn't get back to him. And so I finally messaged him like a month later. I was like, hey man, I'm really sorry. I just want to let you know, like, I don't have the time to give you the attention that you deserve right now. And so the issue is going to be, I don't want to disrespect you like that. So why don't we, if you really want to work with me, if we really want to do this stuff, why don't we come back to it in 2 months and whatever. And to my surprise, he came back and he was like, man, that's really great. Like, I love it. Like, let's chat, in 2 months or whenever you're free, let's do it. And so that was kind of eye-opening for me as well. I was like, you're absolutely right. Like, people will value that transparency more than, they won't value you trying to fit them in and then feeling like they're kind of a burden on your schedule.
Right. 100%. Well, that's awesome. I appreciate the conversation and for you sharing your experience. And I will let you get back to work, my friend.
Awesome, man. All right. Have a good one.
All right. Have a good one.